On this episode of DVD Hell, we're taking a look at a fundamentalist scare film from the mid-80s made by two guys with way too much free time on their hands at their grandmother's house. Of course, if I made this video several years ago, it would have been because I had way too much time on my hands at my grandmother's house. But the difference is that I'm not fucking stupid. Deception of a Generation was part of an ongoing series of religious propaganda that was hosted by Ron Burgundy, and Ron Burgundy. How about that? I'd feel bad calling this a Christian propaganda or a Christian scare film because I know plenty of Christians in my life, and every single one of them would find what I'm about to show you fucking hilarious. The video comes from Eagle's Nest Ministries, and I don't know how to say this, but I'm pretty sure your eagle is bleeding. What were the other videos in the series, you may ask?
The Eagle's Nest Ministries has exposed certain things like rock and roll music, Dungeons and Dragons, marijuana, and even the New Age movement.
Well, now, to be fair, without marijuana, no one would watch your video, and without rock and roll, you'd just be sitting there silently in your house with nothing to complain about. I'm not a D&D player, but I'm guessing whatever you have to say about that is just as spot on as that movie. The video is hosted by Gary Greenwald, who may have a problem with the toys your children are playing with, but has nothing against plastic surgery or referencing James Bond films to promote his ministries. Deception of a Generation is a long, rambling 90 minutes of the biggest log of bullshit ever pulled from someone's ass. So, what do they start out with first?
If I say something like wicked witches and demon clouds and spell books and even the zone of eternal evil, what comes to mind? What do you think of?
I'll tell you what comes to mind. That terrible Worst Witch movie. I'm all ears now. The first example of the occult in children's programming comes from 13 Ghosts of Scooby-Doo, where the only crime was wasting Vincent Price.
We've seen spell books, occultic amulets, we saw a crystal ball, astral projection to the evil zone.
Yes, but do you also realize that all those evils you're mentioning were from the villains of the show? You know, the characters who you aren't supposed to root for? Also, careful, I think your television is possessed by demonism. Gary is joined by Phil Phillips, a living, breathing Richie Rich, but he's probably best known for his 1959 hit, Sea of Love. Oh, sorry, wrong Phil Phillips. I don't really know anything about blonde Phil Phillips here, probably because no one gives a shit about this Phil Phillips.
Can you tell me what's going on in this cartoon?
No, I can't tell you what's going on in this cartoon because I don't have my marijuana or my rock and roll music to play in the background.
Most people don't realize that 80% of all cartoons deal directly with the occult, and 40% of the toys on the market have occultic influence, and these are the most popular.
Okay, prove those numbers, Phil. Or have you forgotten about these older cartoons, too?
Double, double, toil and trouble, fire burn and cauldron bubble.
But it doesn't quite stop at Scooby-Doo.
Take, for instance, a cartoon like He-Man and Masters of the Universe. It can be seen as many as 31 times a week in an area, with a viewing audience as much as 16 million children each time it's aired.
I agree. It was pretty awesome growing up in the 80s.
Now, could we say that there is witchcraft and occultic practices that are actually being portrayed in these cartoons?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, you could say that, but then I could also say that Phil Phillips likes sticking smaller gerbils up bigger gerbils' assholes, which according to Phil's logic would make that true. Sorry for interrupting. Continue.
They're taken from actual witchcraft, actual pagan religions, levitation, mind control, astral projection, and other forms of witchcraft ceremonies.
In which the Bible has none of those things. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to go outside and tend to this burning bush in my front yard. One clip isn't enough to convince me, though. I need to see some more material.
I can hardly believe what I'm seeing here. Now, we're looking at occultic things. We're seeing things like the chest of demons and witches and...
Again, these are the villains. This is like getting mad at Die Hard for promoting armed skyscraper robbery. You're not supposed to root for them. By the way, if all these occultist images make up 80% of what kids watch, why are you only showing clips from the same show? Probably because 13 Ghosts of Scooby-Doo is among the only Scooby-Doo material that actually featured real supernatural forces, while the others usually turned out to be a hoax. But they're not going to tell you that part. The only thing this is reminding me of is that Scooby-Doo was never funny. But seriously, why does this guy even care?
The Lord directed me to go on a 14-day fast. And during this fast, I did something very unusual. I walked into a toy store.
Go on.
And when I walked in the toy store, I was faced with a toy holding an occult symbol in its hand. And this got my curiosity up, so I purchased the toy.
Oh, I believe it got your curiosity up. Just like most non-toy collectors who somehow end up in a toy store. I'm being unfair. Phil's beliefs come from a higher power.
About 3 days later, I was driving home from these series of services, and the Lord spoke to me about what happens when a child plays with a toy.
If by the Lord you mean the great Gazoo, who is clearly just fucking with a grown man to give him a flimsy, holier-than-thou excuse to loiter in a toy store. The biggest issue here, though, is the intent of the toy.
You're saying a child actually projects himself into the toy.
Oh boy, I hope children don't do the same thing with these religious toys. I'm pretty sure it's against scripture to literally play God.
And they give it life, character, abilities, talents, and set the surroundings around the toy.
So the child vicariously lives through that toy.
Yes, because when I played with my toys as a child, I literally thought I was the Terminator. There's a difference between using your imagination and actually thinking you have superpowers. If I believed that, I probably would have turned out like you two.
And the Lord told me that children were being affected by these things and that I was to do something about it.
God told you to study children's toys? Yeah. And David Berkowitz thought a dog told him to kill. Alright, can we get off of Scooby-Doo, please? Especially since you're referencing a Scrappy episode.
Well, there's a cartoon called He-Man, and
oh man, isn't that Dolph Lundgren movie?
it was turned down by all three major networks, by the way. It was the first cartoon to go through independent TV stations as a first-run cartoon.
Wait, okay, so you're bashing He-Man for being released independently? Okay, why don't you tell me how legit Bible Adventures is? They're just mad because his strength doesn't come from the fact that he hasn't cut his hair.
Now, Phil, here we're seeing a transformation of He-Man from a wimp, like a Clark Kent type of character.
Whoa, Clark Kent? Yeah, because when I think Prince Adam, I think dweeby Clark Kent. Plus, I'm pretty sure Skeletor is watching you guys. You may want to watch your words here. How much longer until they have a problem with the fact that his name is Adam?
In fact, his name is Adam.
Yeah.
First man.
Interesting.
Until he's transformed.
Yes, it's interesting that his name was Adam. Just like it's interesting that the guy who sold this soda to me's name was Jesus, because I'm sure he was referencing Jesus. I can't believe they hit on that before Castle Grayskull.
To understand this, we have to understand what Grayskull is. It is a castle built by unknown hands in the shape of the skull, and there's a demon spirit living within it that manifests in the shape of a skull.
Actually, Castle Grayskull was once the Hall of Wisdom, which was transformed into Castle Grayskull in order to frighten away villains and to protect their orb and the universe. You would know this if you watched the show.
All of this is coming forth, and the children, whether consciously or subconsciously, are picking up all these occultic overtones.
Oh, very much so.
No, they're not. Because unlike you, they've seen the show. But when you don't have facts, just make up a story that you have no proof actually happened.
But she said, my little boy was in the back seat of the car, and a radio preacher came on and said, our Lord God, the master of the universe. And her boy jumped from the back seat of the car and said, Mommy, God isn't master of the universe, He-Man is.
Kids say the darndest things, but I'm sure this kid also believes in Santa Claus, the Tooth Fairy, and the Easter Bunny. But if you were to talk to this same kid today, I doubt that he thinks that He-Man is real. I may have spoke too soon about this story being bullshit, though, because look, there they go in the background. Tell me, Phil, since you're an expert, what else do the children see?
Out in the parking lot with He-Man in his hand, running around in circles saying, He-Man has more power than Jesus.
Oh, so He-Man was the fifth Beatle? Makes sense to me. Let's be fair to Gary and Phil, because a series which contains many gods, as they put it, is totally a new thing. Right, Loki? I'm blaming you for this series. We haven't even gotten to the toys yet, and hey, oh, whoa, god damn it! You took it out of its packaging! Now it's only gonna be worth about $30.
Okay, now this is the He-Man, a muscular figure and so forth that mostly little boys follow, I take it?
Right.
But the little girls have someone too.
Oh, many little girls play with this toy.
Oh, really?
And you know this how? Did you pick up on that on your afternoons at the toy store?
So you're telling me little boys, for instance, could watch Skeletor with his staff of power here, and they could, and you say this was actually used to crush a dove that represents total satanic power.
Uh-huh. Again, he is the villain. You are getting mad at things that the villain is doing. Why?
So little boys are really being programmed to evil.
Okay, so are little boys also being programmed to want to turn into snakes to offer apples to naked women in the woods? What? Satan is a villain too, right? Is that all you have on He-Man?
Well, Skeletor lives in Eternia with He-Man.
You mean Eternia?
Now, Eternia is a good world
I think you mean Eternia.
that they live in, and we'll see some things about Eternia a little later on.
Oh, good, because I've never heard of this Eternia. I only know Eternia. By the way, Satan also has an action figure. Just saying. It's gonna make the kids want to be like Satan. My favorite part so far is when Gary tries using Snake Mountain.
So let's get a Skeletor type of voice. Let me turn this on here. I think I'm getting it too loud.
Skeletor has one-upped you here, because I'm pretty sure that he knows how a microphone works. Why don't you just let your kid use it? He can probably figure it out. Or just give it to Phil. He likes hanging around children.
Skeletor, the master of the universe.
Don't you remember the kid from Phil's story? Clearly He-Man is the master of the universe.
Little children would actually use that to even identify more with these occultic heroes, right?
Oh, yeah.
No, they use it so He-Man would have something to fight against. Otherwise that would make playtime very boring. I kind of miss the clips, though. Can we see another one?
Skeletor is tunneling his way to the center of Eternia. Can you imagine what would happen?
Wait! I was watching that! Oh, come on now. What do you have against the other toys?
And this young lady is involved in witchcraft, and you'll notice that she's a very voluptuous-looking thing, and they wear very tightly clad clothes and sometimes even negligee.
Ah, so you're not worried about the snake on her staff. You're worried about the snake in your trousers. Hey, look, I think the mailman is here to bring you some more toys. Well, what else do you guys got?
This character is called Many-Faces.
The name is Man-E-Faces, not Many-Faces. Maybe Many-Faces is a resident of Eternia.
You mean little children with Many-Faces toy. Now I've got the little Many-Faces toy here. Can actually see him transform from a demon-possessed skeleton type of creature to a good guy.
Oh, you're just mad because one of them's not named Saul and the other's not named Paul. And by the way, he isn't demon-possessed, he just has a monster face, which, by the way, is his weakest face because it makes him vulnerable to be controlled by Beastman. Oh, come on, guys, you've got a problem with the comics, too?
He is levitating off the ground.
In a yoga-type position.
Right.
Yeah, why can't he just walk on water like everyone else?
Now, he walks to the center of the pyramid, he sits inside, and he starts to steal the power of Eternia.
Damn it! It's fucking Eternia! Oh, and don't tell Gary about Live and Let Die. I hear that one contains the voodoo magic. But back to He-Man.
So actually these cartoons are making real what Satan has had for a long time.
Right.
Comic books? I'm starting to think Gary is full of shit.
When I was brought up, I watched cartoons like Bugs Bunny, Donald Duck, Daffy Duck, Elmer Fudd, and all of the Looney Tunes.
Please proceed.
But today, there's a different kind of cartoon that's coming on our TV sets. Is there a well-organized plot, an insidious design right now to program and influence the minds of our children towards the occult and witchcraft?
I'm so glad you said that. Now I can show more of these clips.
Hey, that's what I need. Something to read. Magic words and phrases. Sounds interesting.
Hocus! Hocus! Now I crush you!
Abacadabra!
Yes, and I'm sure those are different for some reason. This is Mr. Cotter's longest joke, and it's starting to get really old. Maybe it'll keep getting creepier.
Now, in God's economy, children are very important. And I wonder, Phil, if the church is overlooking the children.
Well, if they are, I know someone who will hang out with them at their local toy store. Right, Phil? But I get it. You gotta make sure kids are healthy, and as Gary said, they should watch older cartoons like this one. Oh, I'm so unfair.
Well, in 1978, there was a study done that said children watched an average of 15,000 hours of television before they graduated from high school, while only spending 11,000 hours in the classroom.
Who did this study? Cite your examples. This is as official as a Fox News poll asking if the Reverend Wright created the war on Christmas. Stupid people will give you any result you want. By the way, notice how the clock hasn't changed throughout this entire special. That's because Gary is actually a god of time who has paused the earth so nothing can get in the way of his magic spell of jackassery. Prove he isn't.
Children view television in a vastly different manner than adults do. In fact, until a child is about the age of 7, he cannot differentiate between fantasy and reality as it deals with the television.
Huh. I don't think it's the kids who can't differentiate between fantasy and reality. You two are the ones under the impression that children actually think they're He-Man and Skeletor. But Phil actually does have an example for this one.
In fact, I was watching TV when I was about 2 years old and turned it on, and Lassie went running into a burning barn. And I was crying and very upset by this, and my dad was trying to comfort me and said, "That's not real."
Because you were fucking 2. I'm sure you didn't really think you were Lassie. You probably just shit your diaper for the 12th time that day. And by the way, how do you even remember that? And when you were 2, people were afraid to share the water fountain with African Americans. So go ahead, tell me more about fantasy and reality.
It's beyond their capabilities to understand time.
Well, if they're watching this, it's not going to help them understand time since it doesn't move. Gary and Phil next take the opportunity to talk commercials.
Being that children look at these things as reality, how do they view a commercial?
Well, they view commercials as public service announcements.
As though it's a happening that's really true.
Oh, yeah.
No, they think of them as a list of things they want their parents to get for them. So they cite He-Man and Cookie Crisp as examples of evil cartoon commercials.
Now, Phil, you're saying that as the children watch these cartoons or these commercials, they're influenced by what they see.
No, you're both saying that. Gary is just feeding Phil the words that he wants everyone to hear, just like all cheap propaganda does. I bet Gary is wondering why can't children's commercials be like they were in his days.
Presenting only crinkled cereal in the world. Post-rise crinkles.
Let's take a Winston break. That's it! Winston is the one filter cigarette that delivers flavor 20 times a pack.
There I go again.
What I'm trying to show through these commercials is that when a child watches these about 30 times during a Saturday, he is programmed by the companies to be an advocate for their product.
You're just describing the very definition of a commercial. They then start to get mad that cartoons are used to promote sugary cereals. Although this was in the 80s, and now that Michelle Obama has promoted healthier eating habits, I'm sure Gary and Phil are now pro kids eating sugary cartoon cereals.
Oh yeah, you've never seen a commercial, cereal commercial for children during the Super Bowl or during 6 o'clock news. They don't care if you ever see it.
Uh-huh. Isn't that called demographics? Just like you're not gonna see an adult commercial in the middle of a children's cartoon? What the fuck's your point? The guys then talk more about the viewing habits of little girls, since it wasn't creepy enough the first time around.
Is there any kind of character that the girls can relate to?
Well, there is, and her name is She-Ra, and there's another one that that is out there that is for girls, basically, and that's Golden Girls.
Golden Girls? What? Was that made to tie in with that other show for little boys, Matlock?
They've been programmed by the cartoon to play with the toy in a certain manner. And so if the cartoon says that a character has occult powers, then when the child plays with the toy, he is going to use that toy to cast spells or do whatever the toy does in the cartoon.
Yes, by using their imagination. Just like I'm sure that when you were a kid, you pretended that your Superman toy could fly.
Then he'll take the little He-Man, and he'll begin to yell those words by the power of Grayskull, and he'll begin to throw spells on people by his own imagination of powers.
Oh, that's where you're wrong, Gary, because Phil just said that it isn't from using their imagination.
And then when they don't have the toys and they're on the playground, then they take on these characters in fantasy role-playing themselves, and they imagine themselves with these occult powers.
Right. It's a little something that this generation created called Cowboys and Indians. And by the way, I'm a little creeped out by the crazy eyes that Gary gives when he intros a She-Ra clip.
And it shows her getting her powers also. Let's go to that right now.
I think Phil is upset because he can't drop trow and start masturbating right there. Also, I'm pretty sure the television has stolen Gary's soul. The only thing I see wrong with this She-Ra clip is that I'm not exactly sure what she's looking at here. But this is just another example of them getting mad when a villain does villainous things.
We've just watched a mystical world called Mystical or something like that, and there's a witchcraft competition going on, and this girl, She-Ra...
She-Ra? Thank you for pronouncing that the same way my grandpa would whenever he'd pretend that he knew what the hell I was watching. And if these were financed by satanic cults like the host suggests, I'm pretty sure the evil wouldn't lose at the end of every episode. What? Oh, come on. Thundercats? Oh, what's your problem with the Thundercats?
You talk about Hinduism. Would we see anything like the martial arts or, you know, yoga exercises? Well, we did see yoga exercises last week.
Oh no, it's linked with a religion that isn't yours. It must be bad. And by the way, plenty of Christians practice martial arts.
And they do things like communicate with the dead and have occult powers themselves.
Communicating with the dead? Isn't that what you do all the time? Isn't that how you ended up in that toy store? And since when do you guys have a problem with martial arts?
As we've been observing here, there were gymnastics and martial arts type of thrusting and jumping.
If he's upset now, he's gonna have a heart attack if he ever sees Gymkata.
Here with the Thundercats, and again taken from Hinduism and ancient pagan symbolism.
Well, now you're just complaining because you know that they could kick your ass from here to Eternia.
And that they should look for things in their own lifestyles that would identify with Hinduism, the occult, and mystical Eastern religion.
Creating a desire for the occult again.
Or maybe they just think that Lionel is awesome and Snarf sucks, and that they're not close-minded 35-year-olds who discriminate against any and everything that doesn't fall exactly in line with their own beliefs. And are they under the impression that Thundercats created martial arts? Well, that's gotta be huge news for Bruce Leong. And by the way, as someone with epilepsy, Thundercats is a huge affront to my belief in not wanting to have a seizure. Maybe I should make a 90-minute video condemning it.
Well, if you're seeing what I'm seeing...
No one is seeing what you're seeing.
we find Lion-O talking to his dead father, Jaga. Is that his name?
Yeah.
Jaga. Phil, what is this called when they talk to the dead?
It's called Christianity. Sorry. I just like pointing out whenever they say something incredibly hypocritical. Sort of like when they condemn this Mumra figure for using serpents. Gee, I can't think of any other villain Gary and Phil might be aware of that uses serpents.
If I push the back of this doll, the arms begin to move, and if you put a battery in the back, the eyes will light up.
I'm sure Phil is perfectly aware of the kinds of toys that you put batteries in. And I anxiously await their toy collection to pop up on eBay any day now. I gotta give it to Phil, he does at least cite a source here.
And it's dealt with in Deuteronomy on a number of occasions, that this is something we're not even supposed to have in our homes.
Oh, Deuteronomy, the same book that says that a rapist must marry his victim if she's not yet been engaged, and the two of them can never get divorced. But I'm sure you choose to forget that part.
Totally amazing. I am totally wiped out by what we're seeing here.
Hey, Gary's wiped out face is the same as his offended face and his happy face, but not the same as his She-Ra face or his new face. But listening to these two has wiped me out as well. So tune in next time where I continue to make fun of two very stupid people who are not doing their religion any favors. When we last left Deception of a Generation,
Skeletor, the master of the universe.
well, yeah, there was that, but what was the true crux of what they were talking about?
And during this fast, I did something very unusual. I walked into a toy store.
There was that too. Okay, so it was about two stupid people doing and saying things that would make Forrest Gump call them an idiot. And that was just the first half. Oh, they've got way more to talk about here because they just haven't been given enough rope to hang themselves with. I'm not really sure what's a good seg into their current conversation, so let's just start with this.
Now, our children don't have to wind up in the backyard sacrificing chickens to a moon god to be affected by the occult within the toys and cartoons.
Did you get that from a Dr. Phil fortune cookie? What the hell? Well, if that didn't make sense to you, don't worry, because none of this shit is gonna make sense. In fact, really don't even have to recap anything, because they do it for me by recapping themselves.
And you say some have even yelled out in parking lots, He-Man is more powerful than Jesus Christ.
Right.
Yeah, you told us that story already, and you still don't have any evidence that that actually happened. Maybe it's because I've been watching this for too long, but Gary and Phil are starting to make sense to me.
I know some of you parents that are watching are already saying, I can't believe it. I let my children watch this on Saturday morning and...
Exactly. What kind of parent would let their kids watch two grown men who hang out in children's stores tell them that their toys are evil?
I tell you what, you have a responsibility as a parent to stop the children from having these toys.
You also have a responsibility as a parent to never let your child anywhere near people like Gary and Phil. Unless this seems like a perfectly balanced individual to you.
In the name of Jesus, I break every stronghold and I command that Satan loses hold upon your household, and I praise God for it. Amen.
I would rather my child hang out with actual members of the occult than Gary and Phil, because at least then I'd get a good discount on goat food. Welcome to Deception of a Generation Part 2, where the craziness is still alive and well, and the only thing that's changed is that Gary is now dressed as a snitch from Miami Vice, and Phil is still dressed the same, presumably because his mother hasn't done the laundry yet.
We began to move this direction, and I thought maybe we would start out today by looking at Ken and Barbie.
I am totally catching you playing with your dolls again.
Looking at the two, they're perfect American dream type people.
Yeah, if the American dream involves living with no genitals. And leave it to Phil to quote something worse than Deuteronomy.
Mm-hmm.
And Dr. James Dobson puts it this way, Barbie has absolutely no blemishes.
Ah, Dr. James Dobson. The man who said that one way to make sure your child remains straight is to show them your penis in the shower. This is the type of man that these two are citing as a reliable source.
Little girls would see Barbie being so perfect, so slender, and their reaction would be, I've got to be like her, so they'd start starving themselves.
Whoa, 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 whoa. You guys are bringing up actual issues here. Don't do that. You're going to confuse your audience.
And what was that statement you made earlier, that God spoke to you and said what dolls would do?
Oh, there, thank God. I thought I fully missed the train to Crazy Town, but I managed to get back on board at the last second. In a segue that's about as non-existent as their arguments, Gary suddenly switches gears to Dungeons and Dragons. That way he can show more clips from his cartoon collection. What I want to know is, who stole this guy's horn? Maybe that's why he's so pissed off. Was it one of the demons from the movie Ghost here? Also, are they at a Dungeons and Dragons equivalent of a muscle shop? Okay, well, in case you couldn't tell, I'm not really a Dungeons and Dragons guy, which is why I was just simply making smart-ass comments about that clip. But you want to know the difference between me and Gary and Phil? I'm not pretending to be an expert on this stuff.
I believe that Dungeons and Dragons is a direct quote from the pit of hell, if you want to call it that.
Do you have any references for that quote, other than the ass you pulled it out of?
It is a mind-bending game, a mind-changing game.
Yes, and we wouldn't want children using their mind. No, no, that's what makes them intelligent.
Actually, those creatures that the children can imagine, and
Yes.
children's imaginations are very active, aren't they?
Not quite as active as your imagination, I should say. I mean, really, it's kind of sad you don't play D&D. You're really good at coming up with stuff on the fly. For instance, tell us what a dungeon master is.
Well, the dungeon master is a person who plays God in the game, and he controls all the situations. In fact, the books tell him that he is the god of the game.
Well, yeah, they're effectively the game referee, and they're in charge of keeping some semblance of story continuity. That's like saying that a screenwriter or a film editor is trying to play God.
And then if he doesn't like someone, he can play pretty much against them.
Trying to get rid of your opponents? Why, this is unheard of in a game.
What are the pieces, for instance?
Well, this game affects the most intelligent of our children.
Damn right. Fuck imagination and fuck intelligence. More kids need to watch stuff like Deception of a Generation, because not enough of our youth is dumb enough to eat soap yet. I'm surprised, though, that it's taken this long to mention an actual Satanist.
The good versus evil is white versus black witchcraft. And Anton LaVey, the writer of the Satanist Bible, says there is no such thing as white witchcraft.
See, here's the thing, though. Say what you want about Anton LaVey. He's more likable than you, and he didn't go after David the Gnome because David had a long white beard, much like God's. But after making up questionable stories in the first part, now they mention a young man named Tonio, whose life was quote-unquote destroyed by D&D.
After much sorrow, Tonio finally let go of D&D, only after his father forbid the game as his day's pastime. He couldn't make it his day's pastime. She said he had put aside all studies for this game.
Hey geniuses, $10 says that Tonio, if that is his real name, still plays D&D, and in fact never really quit. Hell, maybe he was just too busy watching the cartoon. I mean, really, Gary and Phil should be talking a lot more about the hilarious line reads.
In truth, there's a 97% chance that something unexpected has happened to your friend.
Oh, brother. Ovino is right.
Dungeon Master!
At the end of the day, though, what's the lesson here?
And that's what we want our children to know, that Jesus is greater than Satan. He
Right.
has won all the way.
Well, then you shouldn't have anything to worry about, unless you're that insecure about your faith that you're afraid that any Saturday morning cartoon is a serious threat to it. What else do they know about D&D out of curiosity?
What do they represent to you?
Well, I believe that it's a direct depiction of Satan and his demon.
You know what else brings imagery of Satan and demons to children? You! I went to religious schools. We had to watch cartoons depicting Satan all the time. And much like the cartoons you're talking about, those demonic figures were the villains. Their next items are a line of toys called the Infaceables.
I don't know much about this toy series. Of course, they come out so fast it's pitiful.
But I'm sure that won't prevent you from talking about them anyway.
Another man-to-beast transformation where you can turn around the head inside, and these seem to be very occultic in their overtones.
Though as long as it's a story involving someone turning into a snake inside of a garden, I mean, that's okay.
Of course, transforming from a man to an animal is a very occultic and New Age concept.
Okay, you can trash the Infaceables all you want, because I barely remember them, but you trash Manimal, and I know a certain shark that's gonna sneak into your swimming pool when you least suspect it. I never really had one of these either, which is a sector, but I still know more about it than Gary does. Oh, Gary, don't do that. Don't play with the kids' toys.
And do you remember those verses in the book of Revelation about the flying beast with the riders on them?
The flying beast with the riders on them. So
you know, the winged horses.
This could actually be taken from Revelations.
Yes, and just like in Revelations, the movie Die Hard also features someone named John. What's your point? Oh, careful guys, I think the owner of the house is coming home.
If this is the direction that the occultic toys are taking, where are we going? Where do you think it's going to?
Furbies, obviously. You guys are gonna slit your wrists on that one. Phil, again, quotes another verse from Deuteronomy, and dear God, I love it when this happens.
There shall not be found among you anyone that maketh his son or his daughter to pass through fire.
No, these are much better verses from Deuteronomy. If any man has a stubborn and rebellious son who will not obey his father or his mother, then his father and mother shall seize him and bring him to the elders of the city at the gateway of his hometown. Then all the men of his city shall stone him to death. Did you forget that one, Phil? Or how about the part where you're supposed to stone your wife if she proves to be lying about being a virgin? Did you forget that one too? Of course you did. Oh shit, Phil, I think someone is stealing your car, man.
Now I think a lot of this can even go back, if we might divert, back to some of the movies that have been coming out, like Star Wars.
Ooh, this is gonna be good.
What is this creature we're looking at on our screen from...
Well, this is Squidhead. He's from Star Wars. And
you know... I think the actual term is Karen, but he is my favorite Star Wars race, next to Furball and Tinfoil. And, of course, the first thing they start with is the Force.
And, of course, the Force is a word used by witches down through the centuries to describe the power they receive from Satan.
Witches also use the word broom, too, but I'm sure you still have those in your house. And George Lucas said it himself, the Force is just bacteria. Ugh. In keeping with the rest of the arguments, they begin trashing the moralities of the villain.
Characters like Darth Vader, who look almost exactly like the ancient Norse god Odin.
Norse god Odin? Let's look at a picture of him. Holy crap, it's like I'm looking at twins. Spitting fucking image of Darth Vader, I must say. Or wait, he actually looks like someone else. Well, let's get a picture of that. Huh, that's bizarre.
It looks a lot like Darth Vader.
I wish we could go back one slide and look at that Norse god, but we can't go backward on these? Okay.
What? Well, of course you can't show that picture, because it would put a hole in your entire argument, and God forbid people see through your bullshit. After this, it gets even more bizarre.
And Obi-Wan Kenobi, and there's a form of witchcraft called Obi-witchcraft, in which chanting Obi, Obi, Obi over and over again releases the power into the witch's lives.
Sometimes you don't even have to point out crazy. The person talking just does it for you, like this.
He is a three-fingered, three-toed beast. So he has the 2 fingers and the thumb, which from my information means Satan is Lord.
No. Yoda didn't become a tool of Satan until he turned CGI. Plus, I don't think Yoda is the only fictitious character with less than 4 fingers and a thumb on his hand. What? E.T.? Now what are you going to say about E.T. other than showing this weirdly flesh-colored nude photo of him?
E.T. also included some inferences to homosexuality within the movie.
What? I love how they don't even back that statement up. He just says E.T. is gay, and that's it. I know that whatever example they would cite would be bullshit, but they could at least try to give an example instead of just stating an artificial fact and then moving on without explaining it. Instead, they go on to this.
Well, I think one of the things they tried to do on this movie is to make people accept that there's more Christ than just one.
You think that Jesus was an alien stranded from his home planet? This makes me really rethink Alf. More comic books are brought into the spotlight, such as Wonder Woman.
Now, she has occult powers herself, but you see these demons coming out of a fiery pit, and she's involved with the demons.
Or maybe she's trying to fight them. They also show some weird imagery of Jesus, and I'm sure Gary and Phil can tell you plenty of places to find graphic depictions of crucifixion. But if you want to protect your kids from this, well, then don't take them somewhere where Jesus is being crucified on a pentagram. Show them Transformers instead.
And then there's the granddaddy on malls, G.I. Joe, and which is also matched by Transformers, which does over 80 violent acts every half hour.
The Old Testament can totally top that. What's interesting here is that in Part 1, Gary cited Looney Tunes as an example of good children's programming. But when Phil brings it up in this part, look at how quickly it cuts away. Almost like Phil's argument was cut short.
And a cartoon like Bugs Bunny Roadrunner, which averaged about 11 violent acts.
I would like to say also that in the Bible, God...
Didn't want to come across as a hypocrite, Gary? That's why I'm here.
I was absolutely amazed recently when I went into the toy stores and I saw that there were complete racks filled with grenades, rocket launchers, all kinds of knives and guns and...
Oh, you had that shit when you were a kid too, Gary. 4 out of 5 people over the age of 45 can tell you where and when the first time was they were shot in the ass with a BB gun. Plus, Gary seems to be getting a little confused about his argument here. Watch as he says the word occultic, and then quickly goes back on it when he realizes that doesn't have anything to do with the topic.
I mean squirt guns that are so occultic in that, are not occultic, but violent in that they depict...
Nice save, jackass. Well, there's no time for Gary now, because G.I. Joe is on. Ooh, and a commercial, too. I gotta go out and buy this stuff. And it's on 5 times a week? TV really is getting better every day. Of course, they use this as an example to trash G.I. Joe's commercialism in getting kids to buy their cereal and toys, which I know, evil, right? Uh-oh, I think Phil's just realized that he shit his own pants and he's too afraid to tell Gary because his skid marks oddly resemble an upside-down star. They try passing the G.I. Joe characters off as demonic based solely on their clothes, but the only thing this says to me is, hey, Star Trek the Motion Picture uniforms with a helmet.
Where through these violent movies and violent cartoons, they're teaching our children that the way to handle problems is through violence.
I agree. They really should have talked things out with the Cobra Commander. Perhaps over a spot of tea or a reading from The Secret Garden.
What we're really concerned about is not selling cereal, though. We're concerned about the trend towards teaching the children to have violent attitudes.
Totally, says the man who's teaching kids to hate E.T. because he's gay. But this is the 80s, so somehow Russia comes up.
And he said that the Russians were more upset about this new trend in America, the children wearing the fatigues and being more militaristically minded than they were about our nuclear arms.
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this box of empty G.I. Joe cereal boxes. You know what? Maybe our toy guns back then did look a little too realistic, but that's not Gary's problem.
But that's not so bad. It's just the children get the feeling that guns are in now, that shooting people is in.
Ooh, don't say that, Gary. The NRA is going to give you an F. Speaking of people who don't know anything about movies.
And people say, well, the Bible is a violent book. But if you look at the Bible, the violence took place over hundreds of years, not such in a compacted 90-minute package with thousands of acts of violence.
Right? A movie is only like 90 or so minutes long, as opposed to Scripture, which spans over hundreds of years, but is still confined into several small books throughout the Bible that actually takes less than a couple hours to read. Seriously, I could read through an entire book of the Bible that involves incest, orgies, mutilation, than it would for me to sit down and watch all of I, Claudius, which also takes place over many years and involves orgies and fetus eating and decapitation. But the point is, it's okay when the Bible does it. Well, you knew this was coming.
I mean, what could we call something like Smurfs? Is there anything occultic or dangerous about Smurfs?
If you ask a guy in the Midwest named Jake Norville, the answer is most certainly yes.
You'll notice that they're depicted as blue with black lips.
Well, isn't that interesting?
And you know what happens to you when you die? You turn blue and your lips turn black.
Really, geniuses? That why they frequently release their bowels? I think Phil did that a few minutes ago. Is he dead too? Other than on the inside? You got any other conspiracy theories?
So, there's Smurfette. She's a female. Well, in one cartoon, she was depicted as transforming from a male to a female through magical power. And so the only female in the Smurfs is transformed from a male. She was not born a female.
Actually, she was born brunette, but I can see how you'd get those two confused. I remember that episode. She actually disguised herself as a male in order to lure another Smurf away from Gargamel, who was gonna kill him. Oh, but you're right. She should have just let him die. Since, you know, I guess they're dead anyway. Wait, does that mean that Phil and Gary think the Smurfs are zombies?
No, what you're telling me then is that even Smurfs carry a homosexual connotation in that most of them are male.
Oh, wait, I get it now. I understand what's going on here. You just think gays are icky is all. You don't care about religion or the occult. You just use that as an excuse for blind hatred against gay people. You know, I guess it helps you sleep at night.
But we're not going to blatantly say that Smurfs are evil. We're just saying that they have all of these overtones.
No. Of course you're not just coming out and saying that you're bigots. You're leaving it to the viewer to determine whether or not you're fucking bigots. Am I right? Guy who sounds like Huell Hauser mixed with the childlike wonder of Kenneth the Page? It's no wonder at one point he actually gets Phil confused with a Ken doll.
Ken and Barbie, but let's look at it from that aspect. Ken, or Phil, what is it about Ken and Barbie here?
I think you're the ones who need to seek help, perhaps from the Care Bears.
That children are to tell these Care Bears their problems instead of telling their God or mom and dad.
Don't tell anyone about your problems. Just keep it bottled up on the inside. That's safe, right? They also start talking about the Littles, but they're probably just upset that the show plagiarized one of their own cartoons about Moses and the Pharaoh. This hasn't gotten creepy in a little while. Let's change that.
Go ahead.
In fact, one of the most innocent, if you could pick up that pony there.
Yeah.
Gary will gladly pick up your pony.
And you walk into that toy store and you see these ponies, oh, they're cute. They're blue and they're purple and they're pastel colors and they're different ponies, and you notice they have like a rainbow colored in their hair, and they're just so cute.
And several years later, Phil was caught having sex with one of these ponies. What's the show called again, Phil?
Is one called My Pony, and the unicorn and Pegasus are used in this My Pony series. Now, in one of the cartoons that featured My Pony.
Ah yes, the classic My Pony series, as talked about by their legion of fans, the Brothernies.
Yeah, and the cute toys need to be looked at too.
Well, of course, if you're gonna loiter in a toy store looking for the evil that children play with, you gotta hit every aisle. They show some clips of Voltron, presumably so Gary can develop a huge case of mustache envy. After, again, knocking another show for their commercialism, Gary proceeds to seg into a commercial for his own products.
As you've been watching today's shocking interview, many of you may want to share this message with family and friends.
And those are called terrible people. Or if you just want to talk about it online, to call out all of its bullshit, like I'm doing.
Evil powers are trying to brainwash this generation of children, but the truth will set them free.
Yeah, I agree. Fuck brainwashing. So don't ever watch Deception of a Generation. But what if I don't want the tapes or the book, but I kinda want that flower? Or can I tape over these cassettes with just the Eagles? Anyway, back to the cartoons.
I destroyed that miserable planet. I took most of their people as slaves.
I know where they're going with this. Because he mentions slaves, that clearly means that this cartoon is pro-slavery.
Well, Phil, there's no doubt that there's witchcraft here.
Oh, that's not what you're talking about? You're talking about the show's witchcraft? Oh, blasphemy. And your problem with Transformers is that it's just too violent?
And this could lead the children to think that killing is okay, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, so instead they should read the Book of Judges. That way they'll know how to nail each other in the head with tent pegs.
And in fact, it's the only violent cartoon that actually shows killing.
Yeah, robots killing each other. That's when cartoons started to take a dark turn.
Spend the night at the Cobweb Hotel. Come into my parlor, please do. In a while all your cares will be through.
Oh, and did you have a problem with this either, Phil?
Back already? Where's the rabbit?
Maybe Phil did have a problem with that, but I'm sure Gary cut him off.
But you know who's really responsible for this? It's the people who are supposed to provide the spiritual priesthood within a family, and that's the fathers.
Hey Phil, I'm glad you're not my father. I like not hating myself. Any other final words?
Well, in Deuteronomy chapter 6, it talks about training up, teaching the child on a daily basis, speaking the word to that child as they rise up in the morning.
And if that doesn't work, stone him. But Gary's psychotic, rant-filled words are what we really need to leave this show on.
If you allow your children to watch these cartoons, if you allow them to bring these comic books into the house, if you allow them to have these toys or you buy them for them, you're going to be held responsible before God.
And if you're a good parent and you actually follow the philosophies of Jesus, you know, your cartoon taste probably isn't going to factor into things.
I pray in the name of Jesus today that any of you that have this bondage in your household, your children are rebellious and being drawn by these things, I pray in Jesus' name that God would break that bondage today. We loose it right now and we put the blood of Jesus over you, your family, and your children.
And I pray that people like you never come within 50 feet of me or my family, because life and happiness is too short for it to be darkened by the likes of your narrow-minded ass. You know, this has been nearly 30 years, and we know what happened to Gary. He still gets around promoting his ministries. But what about Phil?
It was exciting to see this little boy take Bill by the hand and drag him toward not a donut tree, but a dormitory.
What the fuck happened to Phil? He looks like a radiation baby who was later in life fucked by an Elvis impersonator. Well, now he really does look like the type who would loiter in a children's store without the intent of buying anything. That's the end of Deception of a Generation. I'm gonna go watch one of my Transformers tapes now because, well, I'm the one who brought E.T. the porno to people's attention, so I already know I'm gonna go to hell. Might as well go out with a bang by watching some cartoons.
You got the